Hello everyone, I'm here today to drive something a little bit different for me. This is a car that is familiar to, I'm sure, all of you, but somehow I've never driven, and that is the new Mark III Ford Focus RS. And I don't just mean that I've never driven this Focus RS before, I haven't actually driven any Ford ST or RS product ever. In fact, the last Ford Focus that I drove was the Focus that I learned to drive in about 10 years ago with the AA. And yeah, I still have a lot of painful memories about that, but hopefully this car is going to change the image of the Focus for me. And I want to say particular thanks to Carl of Sharky's Machines. Check him out on YouTube for bringing the car down today. Now I'm going to make the assumption that most of you know what this car is all about, but in my mind it's about going fast for not a lot of money. In this particular case, this car is pretty standard. It produces 350 horsepower, will have cost when new around £35,000, and is presented here in this gorgeous shade of nitrous blue. As you probably know, I am a real sucker for blue cars, and I just love this one. Now, Ford waited an awful long time between the second and third generation of RS, and in that time the hot hatch landscape changed considerably, most notably by the introduction of Mercedes into the arena with their absolutely bonkers 360, then 380, and now 400 horsepower A45. And the RS is Ford's response to that. The two biggest changes for this generation are a change from the old and brilliant 5-pot turbo to the new 4-cylinder 2.3 litre EcoBoost unit, and the introduction or reintroduction of 4-wheel drive to a Ford performance vehicle. The idea being that it gives the car better stability, better traction, better acceleration, and of course drift mode for the ultimate in hooliganism. Of course, the main thing we need to do with this car is get it out on the road and see how she drives. First impressions, I'm sitting very high. I've come out of the Lotus, the Evora, and I mean, yeah, it's to be expected. Obviously, this is a much taller car than that. It's interesting, really, when you change from, you know, one car to another, because I think you often learn as much about the car that you've come from as you do the car that you're in. First thoughts, number one, yeah, seating position, very high. Number two, seats, very comfortable. Lovely Recaros, which I believe are closely related to those used in the Series 1 Evora. It is quite quick. Apparently this car has around 470 Newton meters of torque on the overboost. Now, I can't do the exact maths into pound-feet, but that's definitely more than the Evora has. The Evora is only about 410 Newton meters, and, you know, pressing the throttle pedal, and I can believe it. It's about 350 horsepower, so, you know, this is not a slow car by any stretch of the imagination. There's definitely turbo lag. You can feel that coming through, but so you need to plan what you're going to do. The car does like to pop and bang when you lift off. It's kind of fun. It's the sort of thing that I fully expect a car like this to do. You know, it's a bright blue Ford with a big wing on the back. I do expect a certain level of basically don't care. It does torque steer. It does do that. It's not terrible, by any stretch. It's not trying to pull me off to the side, but it's definitely there. You can certainly feel the fact that it's more or less front wheel drive. It rides on the firm side, but it's not crashy. It's not uncomfortable. It's not too bad, actually. I did expect it to be not so pleasant as a throttle response in the car is very keen, but it's a very two-stage effect. When you press the pedal, you do get an immediate response from the engine, and very shortly afterwards, the turbo kicks in and then pushes you forwards. It's fairly predictable, to be honest, so although I'm not a fan of very turbocharged cars, it's, you know, it's not hideous. I've certainly experienced much, much worse. The gearbox is very pleasant to use. I'm quite surprised about that. I wasn't expecting it to be that brilliant, but it's very nice. The throw is a little longer than I'm used to, but otherwise it's fairly slick and does exactly what I want it to do. So this car has 4 different drive modes. You've got normal, sport, track, and drift. As I like my driving license, today I'll be mostly using normal and sport. I've now got the car in sport mode. What sport mode changes is the engine, by which I believe Ford mean the throttle response. Changes the steering, which weights up a little bit. I don't know if they actually make it faster at all. I don't know if they'd be able to do that. It is an electrically assisted system. And they also put the exhaust into what they call sport mode. To be honest, it doesn't really sound that different to driving around in normal mode. Now, interestingly, the dampers and the traction control do have a sport setting, but in sport mode, that is not engaged. That is only engaged in track mode. So in the interests of fairness, in a moment I will engage track mode to see if that really affects the dampers much and, you know, the ride and whether it's usable on the road. Changing mode is easy. You just press a button down here and it's just about to engage track mode, and it's warning me that I should be on a racetrack, but we're quite near Silverstone Circuit today, so I'm sure that's near enough. That's a noticeable difference. It's a big difference. It's suddenly become very bumpy. Yeah, you don't want this on the road. You're just going to get bounced around the place. But it's nice to know that it is here for track, because if you're going to take the car on a track, I'm sure it is much, much better. However, as we're not actually on the track today, I'm going to change back to sport. It does feel very well tied down, this car. It doesn't, you know, seem leery or anything like that. It just feels like a very well sorted hatch. The brakes are actually quite nice. I thought the brakes might not be, but the pedal's very keen. It sort of starts stopping you the minute you ask it to. You can, yeah, lean on them reasonably well. I'm just gently pushing them there. I didn't think I was going that fast, but I just had a look down at the speedo and I was. It is a quick car, to be honest. I kind of like it. It's, you know, it's not my thing, but it does exactly what it says on the tin. You know, it's a lot of speed for not a lot of money. I think, let's be honest, like, the thing with fast Fords is the fact that these aren't going to stay at 350 horsepower for very long. People are going to want to tune them up and do things and get crazy with them, and that is the heritage of Ford RS. It's the crazy people who want to be crazy with their cars, usually in Essex. So I have the car's owner in the passenger seat, and very shortly he's going to be out driving my Evora, and we've been talking about the differences between those cars. And, you know, realistically, I think if, you know, someone's out in one of these and someone's out in one of the Evoras, and you're, you know, down a country lane, I think really there's not going to be too much between the cars in terms of outright speed. But the difference between the two, and, you know, let's be perfectly honest about it, that there's more than double the price difference to get an Evora 400. The difference really is in the way everything feels. You know, it's basically, for the moment that you sit in the car, it's a totally different proposition. I mean, this is a very, very nice car, but at the end of the day, it is a Ford Focus. I mean, that is why it offers such good value for money, because, you know, it's parts shared with your, you know, million-selling family hatchback. And that's another reason it's so popular, because for the guy that needs a sort of sensible family hatchback, but doesn't want a sensible family hatchback, that's what these exist for. And does that brilliantly. It's the kind of, you know, M3 alternative, I guess, for someone that wants something a bit more leery and a bit cheaper. Again, the M3 now, or an M4, is nearly double the money. So, you know, for someone that's just interested in the performance, this is a really, really great car. But yeah, if you want that feeling of specialness, you know, every time you drive, that real interaction with the car, that's what something like the Lotus gives you. But, you know, I can hardly criticise this car for that, because at the end of the day, I don't think it's trying to pretend to anyone that it's a, you know, ultimate driver's car. So, the Ford Focus RS. I'm pleasantly surprised with this car, actually. I genuinely wasn't sure what to expect, and if I'm honest, I was expecting to probably not like it. But it's been a nice experience. Is it a perfect car? No. Is it a bad car? Definitely not. It's quite a good car. You know, you have to consider what this car's mission brief was, and its mission brief is to provide fast but practical transport at a reasonably low cost. and it definitely does that. You know, there's a few places you could pick holes with it. The interior is basically a cheap Ford interior because at the end of the day, it is a Ford. You know, it sits too high for my liking because at the end of the day, it is based on a Ford Focus. But of course, that means you get a big boot, you get reasonably large back seats. You know, there's turbo lag because it has a turbocharged engine in it. That's really a defining characteristic of the Focus RS. So, I don't know, it's a hard car to pick holes in because the complaints I would have about it aren't really things that the car does wrong. They're simply the car's character. It's not the sort of car that I would own because historically I've always been more into my M3s rather than my hot hatchbacks. I've never really been much of a hatchback person, if I'm honest. But if you're thinking of one of these, it's a good car. I think if you took it on track, you would probably find a lot more weaknesses because this isn't actually an especially light car. In fact, it tips the scales around 1,600 kilos according to the people that have actually weighed one, and I suspect that things like the brakes or tyres may start to give up fairly quickly. And at the end of the day, you know, Ford have produced a car with 350 horsepower for £35,000, which is basically half what someone like Lotus is going to charge you. So, you know, there are going to have to be some compromises. But on the face of it, I can't really criticise Ford because they have delivered what they promised. I'll say thanks again to Carl for bringing it down. Thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you soon.